Hello, welcome back to Kim Reads. We are going to start the next part of Wicked in the Vinkus. Chapter 1, The Voyage Out. On the day the 7-year Maunt was to leave, Sister Burzar took the huge iron key from her bosom and unlocked the store chamber and said, "Come on in." She pulled from the press 3 black shift, 6 camisoles, gloves, and a shawl. She handed over the broom. Finally, for emergencies, a basket of simples. Herbs and roots, tin tinctures, roots, salves, and balms. There was paper, too, though not much. 12 pages or so, in different shapes and thickness. Paper was in ever short supply in all of Oz. "Make it last and make it important," advised Sister Burzar. "You're a bright one for all your sulks and silences." She handed a pen, a phoenix feather, known for the endurance and strength of the quill, 3 pots of black ink, sealed under knobby wrist holds of wax. Oatsy Manglehand was waiting in the ambulatory with the old superior Mount. The convent was paying a decent penny for the service, and Oatsy needed the fees, but she didn't like the look of the sullen Mount that Sister Burzar ushered in. "This is your passenger," said the superior Mount. "Her name is Sister St. Elphaba. She spent many years in solitary life and in nursing. The habit of gossip is lost. But it's time for her to move on, and move on she will. You'll find her no trouble." Oatsy looked over the passenger and said, "The Gross Trail train doesn't promise the survival of its party, Mother. I've had 24 trips these past 10 years or so, and there have been more casualties than I like to admit." "She leaves of her own free will," said the superior Mount. "Should she like to return at any point, we should take her in. She is one of us." She didn't look of anything to Oatsy, neither flesh nor foul, neither idiot nor intellectual. Sister St. Elphaba just stared at the floor. Though she seemed to be about 30, she had a sallow, adolescent look about her. "And then there's the luggage. Can you manage it?" the superior Mount pointed to the small heap of supplies in the immaculate forecourt in front of the monterie. Then she turned to the departing Mount. "Sweet child of the unnamed God," said the superior Mount, "you go from us to conduct an exercise in expiation. You feel like there's a penalty to pay before you may find peace. The questioning silence of the cloister is no longer you need. You are returning yourself, so we send you from us with our love and with our expectations of your success. Godspeed, my good sister." And the passengers kept her eyes straight on the ground and did not answer. The superior Mount sighed. "We must be off to our devotions." She peeled a few notes from a roll of money kept in the recesses of her veils and handed it over to Oatsy Manglehand. "This should see you through, and more besides." It was a healthy amount. Oatsy stood to earn a lot from escorting this tactary woman from the Kells, more than from the whole rest of her party combined. "You are too good, Mother, their Mount," she said. She took the cash with her strong hand in a gesture of deference with her limp one. "No one is too good," said the superior Mount, but nicely, and retired with surprising speed from behind cloister doors. Sister Burzar said, "You're on your own now, Sister Elfie, and may all stars smile you on your way," and she disappeared as well. Oatsy went to load the luggage and supplies in the wagon. There was a small, chunky ragamuffin boy asleep behind the trunk. "Off with you," said Oatsy, but the boy muttered, "I'm to go too, and that's what they told me." When Sister St. Elphaba neither confirmed nor denied this plan, Oatsy began to understand why the payment to take the green Maunt away may have been more than generous. The cloister of St. Glinda was located in the Shale Shallows, 12 miles southeast of the Emerald City. It was an outpost monastery under the aegis of the one town. Sister Saint Elphaba had spent 2 years in town and 5 years here, according to the Mother Mount. You want to be called Sister Skill now that you're sprung from the holy prison? Asked Otzi as she clucked the reins and urged the pack horses on. Elfie is fine, said the passenger. And the boy, what's he called? Elfie shrugged. The coach met with one of the caravan a few miles on. There were 4 wagons in all and 15 travelers. Elfie and the boy were the last to join. Otzi Manglehand outlined the proposed route. Sister, south along the edge of Kelswater, west through Cumbricious Pass, northwest through the 1,000-year grassland stopping at Kiamako, and the winter a little farther northwest. The Vinkus was uncivilized land, Otzi told them, and there were no tribal groups to be wary. The Yanamata, the Skro, the Arjiki, and there were animals and spirits. They will need to be stick together. They will need to trust one another. Elfie showed no signs of listening. She fiddled with the phoenix feather and drew patterns to soil between her feet, coiling shapes like dragons rising or smoke rising. The boy squatted 8 to 10 feet away, wary and shuddered. He seemed to be her page, for he managed her bags and tended to her needs, but they did not look at each other or speak. Otzi found it strange in the extreme and hoped it didn't augur ill. The grass trail train set off at sunset and made a few miles before its first camp as a stream bed. The party, mostly Gillikinese, chattered in nervous amazement at their courage to go so far afield from the safety of Central Oz, all for different reasons, for business, for family, needs to pay a debt, to kill an enemy. The Vinkus was a frontier, and the Winkies a benighted, bloodthirsty folk who knew little about indoor plumbing or the rules of etiquette, so the party regaled itself in song. Otzi took part for a short time, but she knew there was hardly one among them who wouldn't prefer to stay where they were and avoid the depths of the Vinkus altogether. Except perhaps that Elfie, who was keeping pretty much to herself. They left the ridge of Gillikin behind. The Vinkus began with a mesh of pebbles spread on brown wet soil. All night the lizard star pointed to the direction. South along the edge of the Great Hills to the danger gap of Cumbricious Pass. Pines and black starstraps stood up like teeth on every embankment. But by day they were welcoming, sometimes giving shade. By night they towered and harbored snatch owls and bats. Elfie was often awake at night, though thought was returning to her, perhaps explaining under the fierce openness when the birds cried and failing and the meteors stitched the omens in the sky. Sometimes she cried right with her phoenix feather. Sometimes she sat and thought words and couldn't commit them to paper. Life outside the cloister seemed to cloud up with such particularly. The shape of the 7 years past was already being crowded out. All that undifferentiated time, washing terracotta floors without dipping her hand in the bucket. It took hours to do a single room, but no floor was ever cleaner. Making wine, taking in the sick, working in the infirmary, which had briefly reminded her of Craig Hall. The benefit of a unique form was that one not to be struggled to be unique. How many uniqueness could the unnamed God or nature create? One could sink selflessly into the daily pattern. One could find one's way without groping. The little changes, the red bird landing on the windowsill, that was spring. The leaves to rake from the terrace, that was fall. They were enough. 3 years of absolute silence, 2 years of whisper, and then move up and outward by the decision of the superior Maunt. 2 years on the war for incurables. There for 9 months, thought Elfie under the stars, picturing it to herself as if telling it to something else. She tended the dying, and those too clumsy to die. She grew to see dying as a pattern, beautiful in its way. A human form is like a leaf. It dies in a set of piece unless something interferes. First this, then that, then this. She might have gone on a nurse forever, arranging wrists, a pleasing pattern above starched bedsheets, reading the nonsense words of scripture that seemed to help so. She could manage the dying. Then a year ago, pale invalid Tibet was carted to the home for the incurable. He wasn't too far gone to recognize her even through her veil and silences. Weak, unable to shit or piss without help, his skin falling in rags and parchment. He was better at life than she was. He selfishly required that she be an individual, and he addressed her by her name. He joked he remembered stories be criticized old friends for abandoning him. He knows the differences in how she moved from day to day, or how she thought. He reminded her that she did think, under the scrutiny of tired fame, that she recreated against her will as an individual, or nearly. At last he died, and the superior of Maunt had said that it was time for her to go and atone for her mistakes, though not even the superior Maunt knew what they were. When that was done, well, she was still a young woman. She could still raise a family. Take her broom and remember, obedience and mystery. You can't sleep, said Otzi one night as Elphaba sat under the stars. But though her thoughts were rich and uncomplicated, her words were poor, and she merely grunted. Otzi made a few jokes at which Elphie tried to smile, but Otzi laughed enough for the both of them. Big full laughs. It made Elphaba tired. Isn't that cook a piece of work? Said Otzi, and told some episode that seemed pointless, and she chortled in her own story. Elphie tried to enjoy, tried to grin, but above the stars grew thicker, more like glittering fish spawn than salt. They turned on their stalks with a cursing, grinding sound. If only she could hear it. She couldn't hear it. Otzi was too coarse and loud. But there was so much hate in this world, and too much to love. Before long, they came to the edge of Kelswater, a murderous slice of water lying as if cleft from the outside of a thundercloud. It was all gray, no lights on it. That, said Otzi, is why the horses don't drink from it, nor travelers. That's why it was never trucked in aqueducts and run to the Emerald City. It's dead water, and you thought you'd seen it all. Still, the travelers were impressed. A heaviness arose on the western edge, the first hint of the Great Kells, the mountains that separated the Vinkus from the rest of Oz. From here, the mountains appeared as thin as gas. Otzi demonstrated the use of fog charm in the event of an attack by a band of Unamada hunters. Are we going to be attacked? Asked the boy who seemed to be Elphie's page. I'll get him dead before no one knows what's on. The fear rose up from him and caught on the others. We usually do well, said Otzi. We just need to be prepared. They can be friends, if we are friends. The caravan straggled by day, 4 wagons keeping their distance, accompanied by 9 horses, 2 cows, a bull, a heifer, and various chickens without much personality. The cook had a dog named Killyjoy, who seemed to Elphie a Makejoy instead. A painting, sniffy thing. Some people thought for a time he might actually be a dog in hiding, but they gave up the idea. Ha! Elphie said to the others. Have you spoken to animals so seldom that you can't remember the difference anymore? No, he was just a dog, but a glorious doggy dog, full of rage and exaggerated devotions. Killyjoy was a mountain breed, part Leinster Collie, part Lens Terrier, and maybe part wolf. His nose went up like a butter curl in gray-black ridges and ribs. He could not be kept from hunting, but he did not catch much either. By night, when the wagons squared off together, the cooking fire within, the animals just nearby without, and the singing began at last, Killyjoy hid under the wagons. Otzi heard the Boy told the dog his name. I'm Liir, said the boy. You can be my dog, sort of. She had to smile. The fat child was not good at making friends, and a lonely child should have a dog. Kale's water slipped back, out of sight. Some felt safer away from it. Almost hourly, the great kells rose and thickened, the color now like brown rind of a butterdew melon. Still, the track meandered along the valley, the Vinkus River on sight, the mountains beyond it. Otzi knew several places to ford, but they clearly weren't marked. Well, they searched Killjoy, caught a valley guide at last. He bled and whined, and was treated for poison. Liir made him let him ride in his arms, which made Elphie faintly jealous. She was almost amused to know in oneself such a turgid, old-fashioned feeling as jealousy. The cook was angry that Killjoy preferred someone else's company more than his. He shook his label overhead as if summoning the wrath of the angels among the stars. Elphie thought of him as a butcher cook, as he seemed to have no scruples about shooting rabbits and eating them. How do you know they're not rabbits? She said, and she wouldn't take a bite. Quiet you, or I'll cook that little boy instead, he answered. She tried to raise Otzi the notion of firing this cook, but Otzi would not listen. We're coming into Cumbricia's Pass, she said. My mind is on other matters. They couldn't help but feel the unsettling irrecocism of the landscape. From the eastern approach, the Cumbricia Pass looked like a woman lying on her back, her legs spread apart and welcoming them. Up on the slopes, the pine boughs shaded the sun. The wild pears tangled their twisted branches together as if wrestling. A sudden dampness, a new private climate, the bark ran wet. With the air sank heavily against the skin. The skin, like half longered or talling. Once inside the fees, the travelers could not see the hills. Everything smelled of ferns and fiddle green, and on the shores of a small lake stood a dead tree. It harbored a community of bees at their work of chamber of music and honey. I want to take them with us, said Elphie. I'll take them and see if they'll come. There have been bees in the kitchen garden of Crage Hall, and again at the cloister of St. Glinda in the Shale Shallows. Elphie was entranced by them, but Liir was terrified. The cook threatened to disappear and leave the group traumatized by an inability to do a top-notch bechamel sauce in the wilderness. Discussion was waged. An old man in the party, heading westward to die because of some midnight vision, ventured as to how little honey would improve the tasteless sparrow leaf tea. A Glicken mail-order bride agreed. Otzi, of sentimental euphemism when least expected, voted for honey. So Elphie climbed the tree and talked to the bees, and they came down in a swarm, but most travelers stayed in the other wagons, suddenly scared of every fleck of dust that flitted against their skin. They sent out requests using drums and mist to attract the attention of a hired Rafiki, for caravans were not allowed to move through the lands of different Vinkus tribes without a guide to negotiate permissions and fees. Bored one evening, and responded to the gloom, the travelers felt to discuss the legend of the Cumbric Witch. Who comes first, the fairy queen Liir, or the Cumbric Witch? Ego, the sick old man, quoted the Oziad and reminded them all of how creation worked. The dragon of time created the sun and moon, and Liir cursed them and said their children wouldn't know their own parents. And then the Cumbric Witch came along in the flood, the battle, the spelling of evil in the world. Otzi Manglehand disagreed. She said, You old fools! The Oziad is just a frilly romantic poem of older, harsher legends. But lives and folk memories truer than how some artsy poet says it. In folk memory, evil always predates good. Can this be true? Said Ego with interest. Surely there is a handful of nursery merchants that start. Once in the middle of a forest lived an old witch, or the devil was walking out one day and met a child, said Otzi, who was showing that she had some education as well as grit. To the grim poor, there always needs to be no poor tale about where evil arises. It just arises. It always is. One never learns how the witch became wicked, or whether that was the right choice for her. Is it ever the right choice? Does the devil ever struggle to be good again? Or if so, is he not the devil? It is at the very least a question of definitions. It is certainly the tales of the Cumbric witch abound, agreed Ego. Every other witch is just a shadow, a daughter, a sister, a decadent descendant. The Cumbric witch is the model further back than what seems impossible to go. Elphie remembered the ambiguous scroll of the Cumbric witch. Was it she? Found in the Library of Three Queens that summer long ago, standing in the shining shoes, straddling a continent, nursing or choking a beast. I can't believe even the Cumbric witch, even in the Cumbricious path, boasted the cook. You don't believe in rabbits either, snarled Elphie, suddenly annoyed. The question is, does the Cumbric witch believe in you? Temper, sang out Otzi, and turned out into a sing-along. Elphie stamped away. There was too much like her childhood. Discussions with her father and Nesta arose about where evil begins, as if one could ever know. Her father could use to orchestrate proofs about evil as a way of persuading his flock to convert. Elphie had come to think, back in Shiz, that as women work alone, men wore proofs to concern their own sense of themselves, and thus be attractive. But surely evil was beyond proof, just as the Cumbric witch was beyond the grasp of noble history. And that's the end of that chapter. We'll see you later.